Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Carrie. Hello, everyone. My name is Maria Cole. I work at Women Helping Women, which is in Cincinnati, Ohio, so Southwest Ohio, for those of you who aren't familiar with Cincinnati. And Jayne and I are here to talk to you a little bit about how we developed a virtual program for her classroom at Cincinnati State in the spring, and hopefully how we will continue to partner in the upcoming school year for additional virtual programming. Jayne, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, hopefully you guys can see me. I think I'm on a different web login to WebEx. Yeah, I'm Jayne Dressing and I teach at Cincinnati State. My main position there is coordinator of experiential education for humanities and sciences students. And I also teach a first year experience course, a couple semesters out of the year. And in the past, Maria has come and done in-person presentations for my class and also for the group that I'm a faculty advisor for, which is our Women's Empowerment Network on our campus. So we've had a long partnership of workshops and educational opportunities for students around prevention. So.
Thanks. So this is just an outline of what we're going to be going over today with you all. So really, we're going to kind of frame out our partnership, Women Helping Women's partnership with Cincinnati State's partnership, talk through how I developed the virtual program, talk through how Jayne facilitated the virtual program, and we'll go into a little bit of detail about like really how that partnership played into the fact that like I developed it, but then didn't facilitate it live. Jayne really did most of the facilitating. And then we'll go through the strengths of the program as it exists right now, but then the opportunities for growth, because really this was the first iteration of the program as it stood. And I think that there are a lot of opportunities, especially now that people are used to being in virtual spaces with each other, used to learning online. I think there was a lot of kind of muddling through what virtual programming looks like at the beginning of all of this mess of COVID. But at this point, especially as we move into the new academic year, there are a lot of opportunities to strengthen the program, to create new content, etc. So that's what you can kind of expect from us over the next 45 or 50 minutes. I want to talk a little bit about our partnership with Cincinnati State, and I'll talk through kind of the greater partnership from a collegiate perspective, and then Jayne will kind of talk a little bit about the fact that I've been partnering specifically with her classes and her organizations. So for those of you who don't know, Women Helping Women is a rape crisis and domestic violence center in Cincinnati, Ohio. We serve all survivors of gender-based violence, so domestic violence, sexual assault, and stalking. And at this point, I manage all of our community education efforts, including our efforts on local college campuses. So we serve about 7 different colleges and universities in the greater Cincinnati area, one of which is Cincinnati State. And when I came on staff in 2017, I made it one of my goals to really work hard to develop a strong relationship with folks at Cincinnati State, both faculty and staff there. So I work really closely with the Student Activities Office to put on programs for the greater Cincinnati State campus community, but I also work closely with individual faculty members to develop and facilitate programs for their students specifically in individual classes. Jayne, do you want to talk a little bit about our partnership?
Yeah, so I've been teaching the first year experience class for quite some time. I've always been able to incorporate programming from Women Helping Women into our unit on healthy relationships, on sexuality, and our unit on diversity. And Maria and I have also worked together to bring some programming to the campus as a whole through student activities and also through the student group that I'm a faculty advisor for, which is called the Women's Empowerment Network. And that organization's goal is to provide leadership and educational opportunities to women on campus. It's a group that is faculty, staff, and students who are in a mentor-mentee partnership. And that programming has been something that's happened outside of the classroom. It's been something that has been part of the classroom experience, and it has been something that's been offered to the entire student population, as well as some smaller focused groups like the Women's Empowerment Network.
And so when we all kind of started working from home during COVID, I really thought about how am I going to continue to partner with these colleges and universities that I typically work with, because just because we're at home with COVID doesn't mean that students deserve to not learn about healthy relationships, consent, sexual violence, bystander intervention, all of that stuff. They still deserve to learn all of that. And during COVID, it might be even more important because they're at home with family members and maybe partners who they haven't been spending as much time with because they have been working outside of the home, going to school, etc. So violence actually has been escalating because of the close proximity, or one of the reasons is because of the close proximity. So I wanted to make sure that students still had access to this information. And I reached out to Jayne and basically said, like, I'm willing to partner in whatever way you're willing to help partner. So we decided that the consent and healthy relationships program could be a good way to still engage students in this conversation, while also doing this virtually. And typically those programs are separate. So typically I'll do a 50-minute or an hour program on consent and then a 50-minute or hour program on healthy relationships. But because it's virtual, we figured that we could probably combine that material into one program, and kind of and facilitate that program as best we could. So when I was looking over the curriculum for both, or the curricula for both programs, I created a PowerPoint recording via Zoom and then edited it via iMovie, and basically used the same curricula as I would the other two programs, so as I would if I were in person, and just took out a lot of the interactive activities, which for me definitely hurt my heart, because I think one of a lot of the feedback that I get from my programming is that the students love the fact that we do activities. They get up and move around and interact with each other, hear each other's experiences. So that when I took a lot of those components out, I recognized that a lot of the skill building is not necessarily always going to happen in virtual programming. They're going to be building a lot more knowledge around these topics and not as much skills. But that, I mean, I still feel like it's necessary for them to build that knowledge. I also included a few more videos in the program, again, just because maybe to just break up the monotony of me talking at them. Because again, with the recorded PowerPoint, it wasn't necessarily a live program from my perspective. So I wasn't in the classroom or in the virtual classroom with the students interacting. So the multimedia videos just kind of broke up the monotony. And then I also included some student discussion questions, which we'll look through all three of these components in a little bit. But it was just important that I think there are so many different types of learners. And when we all kind of went virtual, I think a lot of times we didn't necessarily consider the fact that just because students are not in the classroom doesn't mean that they're learning any differently. Some students need that visual reminder, so the PowerPoint was really important. A lot of students do learn by activities, and so I was really concerned about like how they were going to learn. So I felt like the multimedia videos and maybe the discussion questions could provide some of that like interactiveness without actually being in the room with them. Jayne, do you have anything else to add with this?
I would just say that one thing I think that is a potential benefit is that often getting somebody onto campus at the right time, the right day, getting it scheduled, making all of those pieces align is sometimes challenging. You never know the right time that you can pick that's going to work for students. And what was great about this was that I could weave this into my course and also do that activity and discussion piece, but I wasn't relying on are we going to get to campus at one particular time? I felt like I actually could reach more students. And, with it being recorded, there was the opportunity for students who weren't present to go back and, and be part of that. So I do think also there was a part of the watching it as a student on the other side of a screen that maybe made it a little less intimidating for them, to be part of that, but not worry about somebody looking at them or, yeah, I think that was a benefit to having it be this way.
So this is a screenshot of what the video or what the PowerPoint recording looked like. So again, I use the exact same curricula from my consent program and from my healthy relationship program and just combined it into one program and took out the activities. And so I recorded myself via Zoom. So it was really it honestly was pretty easy. So Zoom makes it really user friendly to just record an individual meeting where I was just the only participant. And I recorded myself. It's about 34 minutes long. So like I said earlier, typically those programs are going to be anywhere from 50 minutes to an hour. But I know that with the attention span of virtual life, and especially a college student's attention span at this point, I didn't want to overwhelm them with a 50-minute PowerPoint. That seemed like a lot. So it was about 34 minutes. My icon was in the top right corner. So they saw me speaking, which I think was also important. If I was just kind of this monotonous voice in the background, I don't think that the students would have engaged as well with the content. And I also added a few more questions into the actual PowerPoint itself and answered those questions myself. So for example, at the beginning of the PowerPoint or at the beginning of the program, I always ask what was the first time you learned about sexual health? And typically in a classroom environment, there is a ton of chatter about this. Every student is willing to say I learned about it from my parents, or I learned about it in school and it wasn't really well done, or my parent explained all of it to me and they did a great job. So I had to do a little bit more of anecdotal examples from my own life, which hopefully helped to bridge that gap. Who knows whether that actually helped or not, but I do think that there were a few key moments in the program where I gave examples from my own personal life, and hopefully those connected to at least some of the students in the class. I can't necessarily can't speak to all of their lived experiences, obviously, but hopefully during those points in the program, they were thinking to themselves. I encourage them to think to themselves about okay, I would typically ask this in class, but think to yourself about the time that you did learn about sexuality or sexual health for the first time. What's your personal definition of consent? What do you consider the most important characteristic of a healthy relationship? So that's kind of the framework for the PowerPoint. And then these are the three multimedia videos that I included. Typically during the healthy relationships and the consent separate programs, I do include the top two videos. I added the third video at the bottom just because I thought that, again, it could potentially break up the monotony. These added, a total of probably 10 minutes to the students' learning. They are from completely different sources, and I think they build out their knowledge again of what healthy relationships look like, what consent is. So it was important to, I think, from my perspective, to include these. Jayne, do you want to talk about how you had the students engage with the multimedia videos?
Right. So I actually made this an entire class lecture. So we pulled up the video of Maria doing the presentation, and then we would pause the video and have some conversation around some of the questions that she poses in her PowerPoint presentation. And then at a certain point, when it was kind of a break in her presentation, we watched the videos together. And like I pulled it up on YouTube, they watched the video. And then we had a discussion around the video. So we had some reactions to the videos. I asked them to reflect on the videos in a later assignment. But I thought that was a really powerful piece. They of course had a lot of reactions to the videos. Some of them were familiar, they'd seen it before. I think in particular the video where there was a very frank discussion about sexuality, that was pretty refreshing to students, that felt like their experience was reflected in that video. I think the second video that we watched that was about, really highlighted an unhealthy relationship. The feedback that I got from students was that they had seen that scenario play out a lot of times in their friends or family members, and so it was very relevant to them. The videos felt, fresh and relevant and timely, and in a way reflected a type of unhealthy relationship that is not necessarily a physical violence, but an emotional abuse nonetheless. And that was, I think, really helpful for them to work through that, what they were seeing in terms of red flags in their own relationships or in the relationships of friends or family members. And so we definitely had a lot of discussion around these. I think we made it through 2 videos, and then they watched the third as sort of an outside of class assignment, because we were getting toward the end of our hour. We had about a 50-minute class period. So.
And then the last component that I included in this virtual program was discussion questions, or were discussion questions that I had thought either Jayne could facilitate during the class period, or students could do outside of the class period. The good thing about these discussion questions are that they do provide some room for like being wrong or like subjectivity. So this wasn't an assignment that I thought like, oh, I need to like gauge their knowledge of the things that we've gone over during the program. It was really very much like, when did you first learn about sex and sexuality? That's a very subjective question. During the program, we go over 10 signs of a healthy relationship and then 10 signs of an unhealthy relationship. And so during an in-person program, I go through all of those like 10 or 20 signs, and I focus equally on healthy and unhealthy. But because I wasn't in a classroom with them, I wanted to focus solely on the healthy relationship part, because again, for some of these students, they might be experiencing unhealthy relationships. And so they might be able to easily pick out those unhealthy relationship characteristics. But I wanted them to recognize fully those signs of the healthy relationship as well. So hopefully we can build their knowledge base on that too. And then during an in-person program, we go through all sorts of scenarios, and I have them kind of rank them from healthy, unhealthy to abusive. And I still wanted them to be able to recognize those scenarios and whether they're somewhere along that spectrum of healthiness or unhealthiness or abusiveness. So it was important for me, I think, to include those two. Jayne, do you want to talk about how you use the discussion questions in your class?
Right. So we had actual class time that we discussed these questions after each of the videos, but then I assigned a written reflection assignment to the PowerPoint and to the videos, and they turned that in as part of this unit. And I got a lot of feedback from students. I also asked them, they participated in a survey as well. One of some of the feedback that I got was that these were things they hadn't really thought about before. they had never really identified certain behaviors as unhealthy, but seeing them, in a lineup like that, they were really able to distinguish when they looked at the healthy behaviors. So it really was an opportunity for conversation. I think having the written reflection piece sort of allowed some students to be off the hook to, have to interact in the present in a discussion, but they could put that in the writing. So I think that was kind of a balance of both. But I also think that having an assignment around it and having the reflection and discussion around it sort of made them accountable for watching it, for reflecting and thinking about it. So as opposed to just let's watch this video in class, they really did have to respond and think about it.
So I'm going to talk about just some things to consider when creating the virtual programs, and then Jayne is going to talk about some things to consider when actually facilitating. So for me, it was really important to consider audience accessibility. So whether that means technology access, because we know that not every student has access to reliable Wi-Fi, or maybe even like a computer to engage with the content. And then there's always differing abilities, whether that's abilities for technology or like the deaf and hard of hearing students. I wanted them to also be able to fully engage with the program. So it was important to put words up on the screen. If I were to do this again, I would use closed captioning so that they have an even easier time engaging with the content. The length of the program, I kind of already talked about this, but folks' attention spans are just dwindling by the minute at this point for virtual content. So it was really important that I wasn't just talking at them for 15 minutes or an hour, because I wouldn't be doing that in the classroom. So the length of the program, as it ended up being like 34 minutes, that would probably be the amount of time that I would like lecture to them in a typical classroom experience. And then the rest of the time would have been doing activities, getting up, moving around the room, engaging in that scenario work, having like really hard conversations, but good conversations. So took into consideration that. Also the level of interaction. So because I wasn't going to be the one facilitating the program live, I wanted to ensure that I wasn't giving Jayne all of these activities to do with the students and relying on her and to do that. So I thought about how the program could be interactive, but just in different ways. So if I were to do it again, I could definitely facilitate it live via Zoom and put students in breakout rooms and allow them to have those discussions amongst themselves. But again, this was kind of the first iteration of the program, and I think that it worked honestly pretty well for what we were working with. That kind of goes into who will be facilitating. So whether it's the preventionist or the expert in it, I consider Jayne an expert in this topic as well. So it felt really nice for me to be able to rely on her to facilitate the discussion. If I were working with other faculty members who might not have the level of expertise in consent and healthy relationships, I would probably tailor the program a little bit more to either be me live facilitating or more hands-off facilitation from the faculty member. It really would depend. And then just the content in general is hard. And I also wanted to consider the fact that some of these students might be living at homes where abuse could be happening. There might be unhealthy relationship dynamics, and they might not have a private space to engage with this content. So typically in a typical program, I'm talking freely, and I encourage the students to talk freely because there is that level of confidentiality in a classroom. But because these students were engaging in this in their bedrooms at home, or in a family room at home, or in an apartment with 4 other people, I knew that we couldn't necessarily create that same level of confidentiality. So I did kind of tailor the content to that knowledge, that underlying knowledge of like, this might not be a completely safe space for the students to engage in this content.
I just want to kind of chime in on that that aspect, because I did, prior to our class session, I did let them know that our next class discussion was going to be one where we were going to really be working through some what I called more adult content, because I'm at a community college and we have students who are parents. And at that time when we were doing this, everyone was at home and their kids were at home. So I did sort of, we had that kind of warning that, this was going to be content that if you didn't feel like you were in a space right now to watch these videos, you could pause that part, come back to it when you had more time to work on it individually, or when you didn't have roommates or children around. So I did, put that out there. And I think that's what was nice about it being a video, is that they could stop it, they could come back. It was recorded. They could go back and do watch the videos at their own time, and then respond to the questions. So.
Do you want to talk a little bit about facilitation?
Yeah. So the way that I have used this content in my class, this was a first year experience course. So again, it was a unit on healthy relationships and on sexuality. I actually had it as a regular class session. So again, we talked about the fact that we were going to be covering some challenging content, and that there was definitely adult information in these videos, and to be aware of that. We walked through the entire presentation as a class, pausing to watch the videos. One thing that I think would be helpful, as we're revamping this for future, is that the students have a way to interact that they don't have to speak. It could be the chat feature, or it could be something through Kahoot or some other thing that they could do with their phone, where they can chime in or make comments, but maybe they're not tied to them individually, so that they feel a little bit more anonymous in this kind of participation. I know at our college, we are really, sort of frantically thinking about how we're going to bring student activities to campus, what kinds of programming are going to be effective for students, how do we get them there. Some colleges I know have a women's center, or some place that this content might make sense to do some programming around. We at our college have first year experience, and we've always tried to weave this into that first year experience course. But I think this content would be essential for people going into public health, going into nursing, community health workers, social work majors. Really great content to include that could be part of a course curriculum, or even offered as some sort of a professional development or an extra credit assignment in some of those courses, to be to participate in this. I don't know if I've got to all of that, but I think anything else I should add, Maria?
No, I think that kind of sums it up perfectly. I will definitely say, like, whenever I'm creating content for in-person or virtual programs, I am always considering the audience that I'm speaking to. So with nursing students, this program might have looked a little bit different. But I am always speaking from that greater public health sphere. Because really, I mean, we're all, as we've all learned with COVID, we're all participating in public health every single day of our lives. And so I do tie a lot of the components of the program back to that public health model, back to the social ecological model, so that students really understand how this is applicable, not to just their life at school, but their life at home, in their personal life with their families, etc.
And I would say that sometimes I hear from, first year experience faculty that, I'm not really comfortable talking about this. I don't feel like I would have the right answer if somebody asked me a question about a gender identity question, or maybe I really would say the wrong thing. And I think that's what's can be effective about having this programming virtually, is that there is an opportunity for somebody to be able to walk them through this. Maybe it's content that is more uncomfortable for some faculty members to present, and but it can be woven into the course with kind of a guest facilitator, if you will, in that space. So, and I think it could be a real learning opportunity for the faculty member as well, to be thinking about these issues as they relate to their students. You know, these are concerns that a lot of students have around their sexuality, around their relationships, and you know, they don't just leave that stuff at home when they come to campus or come, you know, to the classroom. It's all part of their identity. So I think it helps all around.
Yeah. So I would say that overall, this program felt like a success for both Jayne and myself. It was really easy to create. So like I said earlier, I used Zoom to create it and then iMovie to edit it, but there are a million and one editing softwares out there as well. So you don't necessarily have to have a Mac to edit a program like this. I was able to use similar curriculum and like a similar way to deliver it that I would if I were in person with the students, which felt easy to me. It definitely takes a lot of time to develop curricula or to develop one single program even. So for me to be able to kind of parse through what I would typically do with students in the classroom and pick out the key points and then just put them into one PowerPoint felt really easy for me as a preventionist, especially as I was trying to navigate this type of programming with all of the schools that we partner with. I do think that there is I guess it was a major plus in my book that students could be a little bit more candid and honest and have a little bit more anonymity when they were answering those discussion questions, doing the assignment afterwards. So, because I do think that there are some barriers to in-person learning when it comes to these sorts of sensitive subjects. Some students are totally willing to be as honest as possible with me and with others in the class, but some students just don't feel safe discussing consent or healthy relationships or abuse with students or classmates that they might not have known for a very long time, or that they might have felt some aggression from in the past. And so to be able to openly answer those discussion questions and be honest in those answers and to give honest feedback on the survey, it felt good to me. And then ideally, hopefully, because this program is kind of a package of a couple of different components, and it doesn't necessarily have to be facilitated by a faculty or staff member, we could distribute this to a bunch of different programs within Cincinnati State or I could do it at different colleges. And it could be a little bit more accessible than it would be if I had to be in a classroom with the students. So, but again, I think that there would be merit to me facilitating it live via Zoom with the class as participants. So I think there's definitely room for some growth there. Any other successes, Jayne, that you can think of?
I think just the feedback that I received from students was overwhelmingly positive. You know, thanks for bringing this to us. These are things that none of our other classes ever talk about. These are real issues. That feedback was great. And also for me, I thought the participation with men was so much more. Their reflections really surprised me on how they responded to some of the questions. You know, that they were really shocked at you know, the video of the unhealthy relationship. There was really a lot more feedback from guys, and I feel like when I would tend to do this programming on campus, I'd have mostly women who would come to the consent workshop, and you know, it was great that it was woven into a first year experience course with a balance of men and women, because they really maybe, you know, again, it was a required assignment, but they participated a lot more. And so I think when we can bring it into those classes that are general classes that, are not just a specialized group like the Women's Empowerment Network, but, they're able to participate. And so I think that was a positive piece for me.
Do you want to talk a little bit about our opportunities for growth?
Right. So again, I mentioned before that I think that this is something that could be targeted to some specific courses. That there's an opportunity maybe for faculty to look at their syllabus and say, where would this fit into my syllabus? How could I incorporate this into my class? And then the flexibility of it being a virtual experience, that they're not trying to figure out, which day am I going to be able to get this presenter to my class? They could do a live event, but it also could be a recorded event that students are watching. Again, it could be an extra assignment that is, an add-on, or, we're going to lecture for an hour today, and then your assignment after that is to do this, this activity from Women Helping Women. And I think one of the challenges that we're facing right now is how to make classes interactive and interesting, and not just open this folder and complete these assignments, but really participatory. And that was one of the things that I liked about it. I mentioned that I thought it could be part of student activities, looking for workshops that they can offer on campus. I think there's opportunities for it to, the way I did it was I was live, but the recording was, I was, talking them through the PowerPoint and the videos. So that was sort of a combination. And I recorded myself in that lecture so they could go back and watch that as well. So that was our regular class session. So I think there's a lot of room for growth in where the content ends up, whether it's classroom or student activities, or the health center, the women's center, some of these other avenues, for students, and again, for them to be able to participate in something that they might not have on their own gone to this workshop on campus. If this means that I get out of class at 1 and then I have to go to this workshop at 2, I'm probably going to skip it, because I'm just, I'm going to head out of campus. I'm not going to stay an hour longer after my class. This allows more students to participate in this content, not relying on being present physically on campus at a workshop.
So just in general, I do think that for you all who are on college campuses, or for folks that aren't on college campuses, it's important to rely on the experts. So if you don't feel comfortable facilitating a consent program or a healthy relationships program, or a program on sexual assault, lean on folks in your community who are experts or who do feel more comfortable. So like I said earlier, I feel so confident that Jayne could facilitate this program herself. But for other faculty and staff members that I work with, they are very hesitant. They were hesitant to bring me into the classroom in the beginning, because again, these are kind of taboo topics in our society that not very many people are comfortable talking about. But after I explained the importance of why the students need to be learning about this, they jumped on the opportunity to bring me into the classroom. And I think that the same can be said with this virtual programming. So just because the students are at home learning doesn't mean that these topics aren't as timely or just as important as they would be for in-person programming. And if you do have questions about this program, we're happy to answer them. That is our contact information. Jayne, do you have any other thoughts?
As you were talking, something came to my mind. On our campus, we also have students who we call them peer health educators, and it's kind of their role to sort of to do a peer-to-peer kind of workshops, and information. They usually, on a normal times would host a table on campus where they share information. But this is another avenue that I felt like this is an opportunity for some student leadership as well to help coordinate some of these opportunities to bring speakers to campus, whether it's virtually or face to face, or to bring this content in. And so it's also been, at least on our campus, a student leadership opportunity to connect with outside organizations and just learn those skills of setting up a workshop and helping to facilitate it, and you know, doing the marketing to get students there. All those things have been leadership opportunities for students.
Carrie, do we have any questions from the chat room?
I do not have any questions in the chat room. I just want to say thank you to both of you for sharing your experiences and what you found worked or challenging or all those good things. I think it's good for us all to hear that as we, again, approach this year and try and figure things out. So I really want to say I appreciate you just being willing to share that with everybody. There's still time to enter the questions in the chat room. There's also only a handful of us. So if you want to unmute yourself, you're also welcome to just verbalize it versus taking the time to put it in the chat room. And you can share that with our presenters here today. And they've, of course, been so generous to share their contact information. So if you have questions following this webinar today, or as you get into it, shall we say, I'm sure that they would be willing to help you as well, troubleshoot something or think through something. So see no questions come in. I think we can go ahead and call it a day. But I wanted to just say once again, thank you so much, Jayne and Maria, for your time, for your work in this space and your continued work as you approach the new academic year and all of its challenges and glories and everything that it will be. So thank you so much. Thank you to those of you who joined us today. And I wish everybody a safe and restful weekend. Take care, everybody. Thanks.
Bye.